Welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be taking a look at a Shedinja stall deck from the 2004 format. Now, the deck is based completely around the Shedinja with a Wonder Guard Pokebody, which prevents all effects of attack, including damage done to Shedinja by your opponent's evolved Pokemon and Pokemon EX. Now, in the 2004 format, evolved Pokemon and Pokemon EX make up a majority of the decks in the field, which brings us to matchups. This deck should basically auto win any sort of Gorbis variant, which is arguably is easily a tier 1 deck and arguably the best decks in the format. But on the same token, it's going to auto lose to any Team Magma deck. Blaziken is basically an impossible matchup, and Swampert can be very challenging. Should auto win Gardevoir as well. Basically, any deck that has an answer to Shedinja is going to auto win it, while any deck that does not have an answer to Shedinja is going to basically auto lose. Now, even strong decks like Gardevoir, for example, Gardevoir might not be able to hit Shedinja, but it does play a lot of basics such as Dunsparce or Roltz or even Skitty that can hit Shedinja. So, to help protect Shedinja and heal Shedinja, we play a 3/3 Xatu line, which essentially you can heal 1 damage counter off your active Pokemon once per turn. These stack, so if you have 2 Xatu, you can heal 2. You have 3 Xatu, you can heal 3. And essentially, we just make it so whenever our opponent hits Shedinja, as long as they're not knocking Shedinja out, we're just going to completely heal off that damage. This basically creates an unbreakable lock. So unless your opponent has a the two strategies against the deck are your opponent basically has to have a Pokemon that can one-hit KO Shedinja, such as Team Magma's Groudon, or it has to have a way to consistently hit the bench and then hit the Shedinja once it takes away all of your healing. These are basically the only two ways to beat the deck. Now, let's just go ahead and jump into the cards here. We do play 4 Dunsparce. It is important that we fill our bench early and that we are able to find not only our Shedinjas, but our Xatus as well. The 3/3 Xatu line, essentially, we need at least 2 Xatus to protect the Shedinja. The 3/3 line just gives us a little bit of buffer room for prizing. Same thing with Shedinja here. We usually need a 2/2 line, just enough to have something to bring up, have 1 active and then 1 on the bench in case they have a warp point. Third line's a little bit of a buffer there. 1 Ninjask. Now, the Ninjask, when you evolve the Nincada into Ninjask, you can automatically put a Shedinja from your deck onto your bench. This is very, very, very strong. Now, the reason we play it, though, is for this quick touch attack. The damage output on the deck is very, very, very low, and there is going to be some situations where you do need to take prizes very quickly. And the Shedinja, the Ninjask gives us this quick touch where we can hit for 30 and then hide back behind a Shedinja. This isn't perfect because we will have to retreat the Shedinja every single turn, but usually the stuff that we're worried about is like, for example, Chinchou, if you're playing against like an MLG deck, can cause problems for you. So being able to hit it for 30 and then bouncing back can be very strong. Now, I guess before I get too much into the deck profile here, I also do want to mention that the deck can take 6 prizes, but the entire strategy of the deck is just to deck your opponent out. And we'll explain that a little bit more once we get a little bit more into the card choices here. Next up, we play 2 Sentret, 2 Furret. And basically, the idea behind this is that with Furret in play, we will literally never deck out because we'll just put 2 cards on top, search our deck for an energy, fail to find an energy, and then we have 2 additional cards in our deck. It doesn't matter how many copies of Town Volunteers, Copycat, any shuffle and draw cards, Desert Shaman that our opponent plays, we will eventually just deck them out thanks to Furret. Now, a good counter to the deck is Furret, but the advantage of that is most decks that do play Furret, like Shiftry, for example, do not play Blossom. So if they don't play Blossom, we can win the game 10 damage at a time, just through Shedinja. Very slow game that way, but once again, with Furret, we're never going to deck out. Supporter cards, we do play 4 Copycat, 4 Stevens here. These are the essential setup cards. Once again, we're not worried about drawing cards because thanks to Furret, we're never going to deck out. 4 Pont, this does help with the deck out. So as well, so basically we play so many stage 1s here that it's very easy for us to play our hand down and then Pont for a new hand. It's not like a Blaziken deck, for example, where we have rare candy in hand and we're looking for a Blaziken, so we're trying to dig for it with something like Underground Expedition. Usually with Pont, we can play our hand down and then just get a new hand. 2 Underground Expedition. Once again, we're playing 14 consistency cards here, and the main idea with that is we're already going to lose the matchups we're going to lose. We want to really sure up the matchups we know we're going to win. So we do play 14 consistency cards just to make sure that we're setting up every game. 1 copy of Professor Elm's training method. This is just, once again, a good general searcher to help us get our cards out. 4 copies of Fastball. This is also to help us just find the evolutions. We do play a handful of different evolutions, but Fastball in general, just it's really easy for us to play a Fastball and then Copycat or Oak for a new hand. 1 Town Volunteers. This is to preserve in case the Shedinja does get knocked out, but a lot of the time I find myself just sending energy back with it, just sending back like 5 grass energy if I've been using a lot of the Ninjask loops. So that helps with that. I don't think 2 Town Volunteers is wrong, but once again, initially I built a lot of the deck to avoid decking myself out thanks to things like Pont, and then I had a couple copies of Town Volunteers in there just to make sure my opponent would deck out first. But I found that with the Furret, I didn't need a whole bunch of cards to make sure I wasn't decking out because the Furret would just guarantee it. 1 copy of Friend Ball here. Not only is this going to be good to search out a Dunsparce or a Furret pretty easily because every deck is going to play colorless Pokemon. Almost every deck in the format plays colorless Pokemon. In certain matchups, it does help to search out the Xatu or the Shedinja as well. 2 ATM Rock. This is to help buffer the deck against Blossom. So if our opponent does play Blossom, can create problems for us because it ensures that we never are able to actually take a prize because they're always going to be healing that 20 damage off. So essentially that ATM Rock, we can rock them twice. Now, if they are playing very carefully and really want that Blossom out, they can make sure that they save 3 rare candies are going to get devoted to that Blossom. But if opponents try to go very aggressive against us early and they play multiple rare candies down, we can rock them once, and then if they try to get back to that Blossom, we can rock them a second time. That can be very strong. I do think you can make some arguments in the deck to play 3 or even 4 copies of ATM Rock just to ensure that we are keeping that Blossom off the field. 3 low pressure systems. There is things in the format that can hit for 30 damage. Skitty, Beldum, and C-Dot are all examples of things that can hit for 30. That additional 10 damage is going to ensure the Shedinja stays alive by 10. We do play 3 copies of the low pressure system because most decks in the format at most play 2 copies of 2 counter stadiums. So that 3rd low pressure system should ensure that we win out and ultimately win the match from there. 2 copies of Desert Ruins. This helps, not only does this speed up matchups against certain decks, but it's mainly in there for Swampert. Swampert EX can be a very, very big problem for the deck because it is able to hit the bench. But since that Swampert EX is weak to grass, we can hit it for 60 with the Ninjask, and then we can start getting the Desert Ruins damage on there, and hopefully fight through a couple copies of Swampert EX before without losing the game. Now, it's not a perfect strategy, and Swampert is still going to be an incredibly hard matchup, but it does give us a fighting chance in that matchup. Energy, we play 7 grass, 4 warp. The warp is to help with the Ninjask loop, so we can warp a Shedinja, go into Ninjask, switch back to the Shedinja, and then we have an energy to retreat. So essentially we get 2 Ninjask attacks off for every warp. It also helps us get out of special conditions if an opponent like burns us or poisons us. It's just really easy to switch back to the bench. The Xatu and the Ninjask are always going to give us free retreaters. So that's going to go ahead, wrap up the deck profile for Shedinja Stall. It's, to be upfront with you, it's not an incredibly fun deck to play. It's not an incredibly fun deck to play against. It's not a super hard deck to play. I will say there's a lot of little tricky turns in there, but I also feel like the deck is very forgiving on misplays. Like, I feel like in a lot of matchups, the matchups are so auto win or auto lose that you could play poorly in an auto win matchup and still win the matchup. I do think there are some different things you can do with the deck as well. I think you could argue, like I said, a higher ATM Rock count. I think you could argue a higher Desert Ruins count. I don't think the 2/2 Ferret is probably needed, just because even without Ferret, you can play between 4 Ponts, Town Volunteers. You should win any deck out. You should win by a deck out before your opponent does. Those 4 Ponts should push you over the edge, regardless of how you play the game. I will say, once opponents really learn how to play against the deck, they get a lot better at playing against the deck. A lot of the times when I was testing this, people would play against it and make a lot of mistakes, and then once they realized what the deck was, they were like, oh, I should have done this differently, I should have done that differently, and they'll kind of find, no matter what deck they're playing, they'll find some better strategies for it. So I don't think this deck is going to make a huge impact on the meta, but if it's a part of the meta, and I think if you weren't super familiar with 2004 and you wanted a very forgiving deck to play, this would be a good deck to take into a tournament. If you hit the right matchups, you could win the tournament. If you hit the wrong matchups, you could be 0-2 and lose. But yeah, it's just a fun deck and concept that I was working on. I wanted to share with everybody. So I hope you enjoyed it. Go ahead and leave your questions and comments down below, and I hope to catch you in the next video.